Okay, we're going to look now at Gridbox. So we again have a HTML that has a container and 4 boxes within it where each box contains some text. So by default, this is how it gets laid out. I've got a green border around the body, a yellow border around the div container, and then orange around each box. So what I can do then is, for the container, specify that its display type is a grid, and it changes slightly. Okay. I can add gaps between the rows. Let's just say I want a little 5-point gap. There we go, 5-point. You can also add column gaps, although we haven't seen that yet, what's happening there. So let's go ahead and add some columns. So we're going to say grid template columns, and we're going to just specify some widths here. So you can either do absolute values, or you can just do values that refer to how much free space there is. Let's just do some absolute values here. So let's just say 100 points, 100 points, 100 points. And now what's happened is we've got this grid which has 3 columns, and so it's put each box into separate column. Let's actually add some rows too. So let's make these, there we go. So now we have a 3x3 grid basically. And it's just put these in, right, in order that they appeared in the HTML. If we wanted to adjust our order, right, we could set the order, let's say, of this to 4. All the others are 0, so it's going to be in order 2, 3, 4. And then we've got box 1. Let's change this first row to only be 40 points. And so we notice, for example, that now the box 3 and box 4 are actually drawing outside of their borders. Here's the key where it gets to be really useful. Okay, so what we can do is, actually, let's first just look at align content. So align content, we can put space between all of them. Okay, so that puts a space, align space between these. But let's go ahead and let's actually get rid of that. Just look and say, okay, I've got this grid of 3x3. Let's say I want to go ahead and say that I want box 1 to be at the bottom right cell. Okay, so how would I do that? I would go ahead and say its grid row is going to be, so not grid row 1, not row 2, but row 3. And I have to also say how wide it is, because you can span multiple rows. So I can either say I want to go up to but not including 4, or I can equivalently say I want it to just span 1 row. And I also want the column to be 3, 3. So we're here now at the bottom right. Box 4, let's say I want to have that all across the entire left column. So box 4, I can say its row is going to be 1 span 1, and its column is going to be 1 span 3. Row. I said I wanted the entire left, so that's not really what I want. What I want is I want it to be in the left column, spanning all of the rows. There we go. Okay, and the reason, by the way, that it's stopping here is because of the fact that we made the rows be 40 and 50 and 50, so that's 240, but our height is actually 50 and 50 and 40 is 140, but our height is 200. Instead of doing that, let's go ahead and say it's 40 and 50, and then we're going to just use free space for the rest. So free space says the first row now is going to be 40, the last row is going to be 40, and the remaining row is going to just take up the entire free space. if we wanted to just make each row the same height, we could say 1FR, 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 and that'll just evenly distribute the space among them. Really, 1FR, 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 and 2FR, 2FR, 2FR are really the same thing. They're just saying these are the proportions that we want to be using. So 1 to 1 to 1 is the same as 2 to 2 to 2. If we wanted our middle row to be bigger, let's just make this 1, 2, 1. And so now the second row is twice as high as the first row. And again, it's using up the entirety of the space from its parent container. Box 2, where do we want box 2 to be? So the key thing about these boxes is they have to be in a rectangular area. So we don't have a way to say, let's say I want to have the entirety of column 2 plus a little bit of column 3. That's not possible. But notice as well, there's nothing about the order that these appeared in the HTML. Regardless of the order they appear in the HTML, we can put them wherever we want in our container. So let's just make box 2 be perhaps, we'll make box 2 be in the second column, and we'll go ahead and do the first 2 rows. Okay, so we'll just have an empty area here. And then box 3, we're going to leave an empty area on the top right. And so we'll make it row 2, row 2 spanning 1 row, which is identical to that. And the column is going to be 3. Okay, so that allows us to lay things out exactly how we might want in 2 dimensions. So unlike the flex box, which really is basically dealing with how do you lay things out in 1 dimension, either in the row or in the column direction, this allows us to lay it out in this 2 dimensions, and as long as we're just working in this grid.